unstoppable wildfire rages, driven by high winds.
And these things can move astronomically.
Thousands of homes reduced to ash.
It's extremely dangerous for the people that live there.
Scorching a path from backcountry to backyard.
Fire spread from building to building.
Through a major city.
Nothing can stop that.
Not even firefighters. This hell could ignite tomorrow if a catastrophic wildfire hits San Diego, California, and burns all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Most San Diego citizens know their region is prone to fire out in the wilderness, but many residents by the sea think they're safe from such events.
I don't know if I'm immune, but I think I probably am. I have to worry about tsunamis.
They may worry about what might strike from the ocean, but some of these city dwellers don't realize there's an even bigger threat coming from inland: wildfire.
If it's fed from the right source, it could go right through the heart of the city.
Which can happen if 4 factors are present at the same time: drought, dead vegetation, flammable housing, and high winds. They all add up to an urban conflagration, so powerful that it may only be stopped by the Pacific Ocean. This terrifying scenario almost did occur in 2003, when a wildfire burned to within just 10 miles of the center of San Diego, California's second largest metropolis, also known as America's finest city. San Diego is a beautiful place to live, not only along the ocean, but also in the countryside. One of the loveliest areas is a peaceful suburb called Scripps Ranch. Good schools, tranquil neighborhoods, and ample recreation make it the perfect place to raise a family.
Scripps Ranch is the closest to ultimate suburbia as you probably could have.
It may be a fantastic place to live, but Scripps Ranch is also a fire trap. 2 local factors make it so: dense, dry thickets of shrubs called chaparral, and the hot, fast Santa Ana winds, which are most intense from September to April.
And if you plop a house in the middle of that, it's a recipe for disaster.
This scenario has always existed throughout San Diego, but in the fall of 2003, one more factor compounded the situation: a 5-year drought. Now conditions were ripe for catastrophic wildfires, and by the end of October, 7 were raging throughout Southern California. Then, on the afternoon of October 25th, 30 miles east of San Diego, a hunter gets lost in Cleveland National Forest and calls for help.
Apparently, the hunter decided to light a signal fire.
And unfortunately, it became out of control almost instantly.
A helicopter rescues the hunter, but his call for help becomes wildfire number 8, named Cedar because of the nearby Cedar Creek Falls. Unfortunately, airplane tankers are off duty and unable to drop water. But an hour and a half after Cedar begins, 450 firefighters arrive on the ground to suppress the blaze. However, due to the rugged terrain, commanders decide to wait until morning, when the fire reaches flatter land, in order to launch a safe attack.
As nighttime fell, that fire at that time didn't look as dangerous as it was, but as we were trying to find a way into it, the wind came up and started to burn.
And it's no ordinary wind. It's the powerful Santa Ana winds that blow bone-dry air from the Mojave Desert, southwest, over the mountains, and through the canyons leading to San Diego.
It's a lot like having a hurricane come at you, 20 to 30 miles an hour, and you have gusts of 50 or 60, and they make for some very explosive situations.
By midnight, after burning for 6 hours, the Santa Anas are pushing the Cedar Fire at a record 12,000 acres per hour, 12 times the average speed, But more troubling, the winds are pushing the fire directly towards San Diego.
That fire at one point that evening was moving at about 10 acres a second. Nothing can stop that.
At 2 a.m., the fire reaches rural areas just outside San Diego. It destroys 50 homes and kills 13 people as they try to escape. By morning, the fire continues its advance in the direction of San Diego, and now it's speeding toward the 29,000 residents of Scripps Ranch.
Within literally minutes, it had gone 8-10 miles.
And we knew the thing was going to come in here, and we knew we were going to lose homes. We just didn't know exactly where it was going to hit.
One of the firestorm's targets is this house on Birch Bluff Avenue. Homeowner Jim Paternini is so used to wildfires, he actually sits to watch as the flames approach.
I took the digital camera and started taking photographs as the fire progressed. The photos were a blend of real and the unreal. The real was the corner of our birdhouse, and the unreal was a 60-foot wall of flames coming down one side of the canyon and up the other side. We knew it was going to get the house, and that's when we threw some clothes in a bag, took a couple of cars, and hightailed it out of here.
Minutes later, Jim's home is engulfed in flames so intense that even firefighters must evacuate. There's nothing they can do but watch in horror.
It was like a furnace there, and there was no way you could have a fire engine on the street.
The Cedar Fire is now an urban conflagration, burning from house to house. It appears to be unstoppable, threatening to turn California's second largest city to ash.
It quickly became the #1 fire. Just about every available firefighting aircraft in the country was in California. Literally the single largest mobilization of firefighting resources in California's history.
As firefighters struggle to gain control of Cedar, 2 new wildfires flare up just outside San Diego. Paradise to the north and the Otay Fire to the south. Now firefighting resources are stretched to the max.
Just because they're stretched doesn't mean if they weren't stretched, they could have put out the fire. They couldn't have put out the fire because in these Santa Ana wind-driven events, the fire goes out when it wants to.
10 a.m. The Cedar Fire is now just 10 miles from downtown San Diego. The city is on the verge of being incinerated. Then, out of the blue, firefighters get the break they desperately need. The winds suddenly shift and start blowing from the west to the east.
The northeasterly push of wind then turned. There was a marine influence that pushed the fire back onto itself. Mother Nature largely stopped the fire.
It was allowed us to get the resources out in front of it, to actually get a control line around it.
It takes another 4 days to put Cedar out. When it's over, weary firefighters take their first break in over a week. But in Scripps Ranch, more than 300 families are left homeless. San Diego County emerges from the ordeal with 2,800 structures destroyed and 14 people, including 1 firefighter, dead.
The lives that were lost, the people's homes, the destruction that it created just makes you sick.
The firefighting price tag, a staggering $30 million.
The Cedar Fire ended up being the largest modern-era fire in California's history, but larger than 270,000 acres.
But it could have been worse. Fortunately, the fire stopped just 10 miles from the most densely populated areas of San Diego, including the beautiful seaside community of La Jolla.
10 miles is not that far. Had those winds persisted, it likely would have, made its way into La Jolla proper, and possibly could have made its way all the way to the Pacific Ocean.
Next time, the winds could persist and carry the flames much further.
Instead of 2,000 homes, 10, 20,000 homes destroyed. Instead of 14 lives, 200.
It's a scenario some experts fear, now that homes have been rebuilt and wildlands have grown back.
What happens is you get a little bit of growth, and then you get an extended period of drought, and it doesn't take much to ignite it.
Next, the worst wildfire San Diego has ever seen.
There could simply be sheer panic. You could be given as little as 5-10 minutes warning.
Catastrophe is imminent as wildfires burn all the way to the Pacific Ocean. When it could happen tomorrow. Return needs 3 ingredients to thrive. Firefighters call them the fire triangle.
You need to have fuel. That provides the energy source. You need to have oxygen. And you need to have a triggering ignition.
But when extreme weather is added, like California's severe drought and relentless winds, the model becomes even more alarming.
I kind of like to think of it as a fire square, and the top being extreme weather. And you just don't have fire in the middle, you have catastrophic fires.
And if extreme weather is present, these catastrophic fires could blaze through the most densely populated parts of San Diego. It's mid-October, and wildfire season is upon California. Over the course of 5 days, 10 major fires erupt throughout the state, in counties as far north as Alameda and as far south as Riverside. Firefighters have trouble containing the blazes. That challenge is about to become even more daunting. In the forest 30 miles east of San Diego, a camper from the city forgets he's in the middle of wilderness that's as dry as a tinderbox.
Somebody flicks a cigarette, and at just the right moment at the right time, and the ember ignites some grass or some weedy fuels.
Within minutes, the small fire spreads into trees and then finds the perfect fuel, highly flammable bushes called chaparral.
The dominant feature of all these characteristic plants, which are basically shrubs, is they're able to withstand drought.
They ignite easier because there's less moisture in them, and they have high volatility.
And that means they're so dry, they can spread fire within seconds. And there's acres and acres of them in the hills outside San Diego. Then, the extreme Santa Ana winds begin to fan the flames.
When you have Santa Ana winds that are blowing 70, 80 miles an hour, and humidities have been below 10% for a day or two, things that are green will basically ignite.
The fire is now a full-blown beast. It rushes southwest, and within an hour, it's grown to more than 10,000 acres in size. The fire spreads so quickly through a phenomenon called spotting.
It's actually an ember from the fire being taken aloft and dropped out ahead. It actually starts a little spot and starts burning.
The Santa Ana winds then carry embers very far, very fast.
Spot fires turn the front of the fire into the back of the fire. And so you try to get people out of the way as quickly as you can. You don't stand there and try to fight it and stop it, because that's how you kill people.
6 hours later, the fire has grown into a monster, consuming the wildlands of San Diego County at 13,000 acres an hour. And the Santa Ana winds, gusting up to 50, are pushing it right toward the city. To stop this from happening, some of the 15,000 men and women battling 13 other fires throughout California must be repositioned to help their comrades in San Diego County.
It takes about 10 hours for resources really to get deployed.
The longer it takes us, the more of a chance we have to have a more dangerous, destructive fire.
Thankfully, there's a fleet of 65 helicopters and fixed-wing tankers to help douse the flames. But they encounter turbulence, a byproduct of the wildfire's combustion.
When you've got something burning, obviously it's going to create micro weather situations around the fire front.
It's a real hazard to the pilots. I've known of pilots whose plane was turned upside down and they had head injury.
The turbulence makes flying far too risky. So air controllers suspend all tanker missions. Now, just 12 hours after it broke out, the fire crosses San Diego city limits into the city's outer suburbs. Thankfully, residents are given plenty of warning and evacuate with time to spare. But within a few hours, over 1,000 San Diego homes are burned to the ground. Next, the fire scorches through Miramar Marine Corps Air Station, Then it jumps across the 150-foot wide Interstate 15 and speeds west through the Route 52 corridor, marching straight into one of America's most affluent communities, historic and densely populated La Jolla, the jewel of San Diego.
La Jolla is a beautiful community. It's got huge homes, a lot of vegetation.
Now, 24 hours into the firestorm, as evening falls, the fire erupts into La Jolla's hilltop neighborhoods. Unlike wildfires in previous years, which stopped short of threatening this densely populated area, these flames show no sign of stopping. The Santa Anas continue blowing for a second day, pushing the inferno from house to house as a full-fledged urban conflagration.
A structure gets ignited. It takes a little while for it to build up, but it's rather extreme.
San Diego's worst nightmare is coming true. Firefighters put up a good fight, but they're no match against Mother Nature.
Immediately you're thinking, okay, we're going to have organized chaos here. It's just extremely hot. You can't breathe. You can't see.
Watch your eyes. Watch your equipment.
By the next morning, 36 hours after it started, the fire has traveled 30 miles, finally reaching the beautiful homes on the Pacific shore.
In a worst case, you could have these embers blowing across Ocean Beach, taking out houses as it went.
When the Santa Anas keep blowing, commanders realize the only way this epic inferno will stop is when it runs out of fuel.
We've seen a number of fires burning under extreme conditions that only go out, not by a change in the weather, but by what we colloquially call the Great Pacific Fuel Break. That is the Pacific Ocean.
After 3 days of hell, the fire gradually begins to die down. But as the smoke dissipates, the extent of San Diego's destruction becomes apparent. 10 to 15,000 homes reduced to ash, and more than 200 people dead.
The worst thing that can happen from our standpoint as a chief officer is to know that we may have some loss of life. It's very devastating to have to rebuild, let alone losing loved ones.
San Diego is reeling. Damage is almost $1 billion. To rebuild will take years.
Fire has the potential to do the magnitude of damage that we're seeing from floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes. It hasn't occurred yet, but I certainly think it's within the realm of possibilities.
Up next, San Diego residents need to be prepared, and the time is now.
You need to have an evacuation plan.
When it could happen tomorrow continues. San Diego, California becomes susceptible to a raging wildfire. But measures are being taken to reduce the risk of such an inferno burning through the city. Several of these measures take place in the wilderness to the east of San Diego. Here, land managers are reducing the fuel that feeds wildfires, dead trees and chaparral, which become highly flammable.
By managing fuels, we're managing the one side of the fire behavior triangle that we have control over.
Another more drastic measure targets the dead leaves and branches that collect on the forest floor. Firefighters deliberately set this incendiary underbrush ablaze, but unfortunately, these so-called prescribed fires can sometimes burn out of control.
There's a risk of an escape when you're doing prescribed fire.
Government officials are taking measures within San Diego as well. Under recently adopted laws, new subdivisions built near wildlands are required to use non-flammable building materials and to have a 100-foot fireproof zone surrounding homes. But some fear these rules aren't enough.
What do people start doing? They start planting plants, they put the wood decks on, and so some of these fire-safe communities may not be so fire-safe 5, 6, 10 years down the road.
Meanwhile, residents cannot just assume that firefighters will be able to protect their property.
When people call 911, they expect us to be there as quickly as when they order a pizza. Unfortunately, there's not enough firefighters and fire engines to protect every single home or individual.
That's why firefighting officials insist that every citizen take responsibility for their own property. But this does not mean they should perform the firefighter's job.
You can turn on the TV, you'll find people up on the roofs with garden hoses, and I don't know of any home out there that's worth anybody's lives.
When the wildfire comes, San Diego residents need to move quickly.
And if you're ordered to leave, you leave.
But some fear that San Diego is far from prepared for a catastrophic wildfire.
I think people will fly to the downtown areas. The freeways won't be able to handle it.
Coming up, will the citizens of San Diego be prepared when the next massive wildfire hits? When it could happen tomorrow returns. A fire through San Diego to La Jolla. But some seaside locals seem more concerned about a disaster that's least likely to occur.
I think the most threatening thing in San Diego is a tsunami.
Living in denial about the risk makes La Jolla just as vulnerable as Scripps Ranch was before its fire hit.
It seems like it strikes everywhere else, but here, I'm sure if it does hit us, we would change our mind.
You never think it could happen to you.
If this attitude doesn't change, San Diego could be caught by surprise.
It's still quite likely that we will be shocked and looking back in 5 or 10 years at a new kind of fire.
This new kind of fire will scorch like a blowtorch through San Diego's suburbs, all the way to the ocean. And it could happen tomorrow.